Hi, today I'm going to make a video about this magnificent piece of Western literature, basically the foundation of Western literature, which is the Homer's Iliad. This is not going to be a review of the book, but mostly an account of my experience and my struggles reading this book. Because this is a gigantic epic poem, and not everybody is familiar with poetry, and I'm sadly one of these people because even though I read literature, I'm not really into poetry, and I know this is a flaw in my character, and I hope to overcome one day. But when I first opened this book, I bought this book 5 months ago, and when I first opened it, I struggle with the structure, and I didn't know how to proper read a book, and that was really sad. But I took it as an opportunity to improve myself and to take it as a challenge, and that's something that I really want to stress for you guys. You have to embrace this. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be a challenge, but it's going to pay in the end if you take it as a something try to a challenge for you. And this book is magnificent. And what I'm saying in this video today is I had two major problems with this book. Firstly, and the first thing was the structure is a poem, how to properly read it. And the second was this is about the Trojan War, and it doesn't begin in the beginning of the story. It begins in the 9th year of the war. So if you're not familiar with the story, you're going to be lost. You're going to be, what the heck is going on here? Who the fuck is Agamemnon? Who the fuck is Apollo? And the book already starts with a quarrel between they two. And if you don't know what caused the Trojan War, if you don't know the names of some of the gods, you're going to be lost. So I basically did two things, and I got a little bit carried away, of course, because I bought a lot of books about Greek mythology, and that would lead me to Alexander the Great, and I was fascinated by the guy, and I couldn't read anything. I spent months reading about Alexander the Great, and it was the greatest journey, the most extraordinary story I have ever heard in my life, and it was basically all true, and that's fantastic. So I bought a lot of these books about Greek mythology. Of course, I didn't read all of them. You don't have to be an expert to read the Iliad, but it's good to know something. I didn't read all of those books, of course. I just read one about Greek mythology and two about Alexander the Great, and even that wasn't enough because you had to know a synopsis of the Trojan War, and you have to know how to read a poem. So thank God I stumbled upon a channel here on YouTube called Schola Classica, in which one of their professors explains how to properly read a text, and it was a fascinating thing to me because it was only after that video that I could understand that the beauty of this text, it is the way that it was constructed. It is the way that the words are arranged, the way that they created the words, the name of the people, and everything is meticulously constructed here. And you can just read it in prose because you're going to lose the appeal, the musicality, and the beauty of the text. So he explains the structure of the poem and how you should properly read it. And of course, you don't have to read it out loud all the time. You can read it mentally, but using this as a parameter to how you're supposed to go and navigate into the waters of the Iliad. And of course, this is my Portuguese copy here, this beautiful copy. And I'm going to read it just the beginning of the book, how you're supposed to read it. And it was fantastic to me. Canta minha cólera, ó deusa funesta de Aquiles pelida, causa que foi dos Aquiles sofrerem trabalho sem conta, e de baixarem ao Ares as almas de heróis numerosos e esclarecidos, ficando eles próprios aos cães atirados, e como o pasto das alves, cumpriu-se de Zeus o desígnio desde um princípio em que os dois em discórdias ficaram cindidos. O de Atreu senhor de guerreiros e Aquiles divino. Yeah, that's how I'm supposed to read it. I'm not an expert, and I probably did something wrong here, but that's how I'm supposed to read it, and it works, and it's beautiful, and it's fun, and it's the way that you have to go through this journey. So this was one challenge that I managed somehow to surpass, but there was still the fact that this is about the Trojan War, and you have to know a little bit about Greek mythology. A little bit. You don't need to be an expert. You don't need to know all the names, but some of the names is going to make the experience more fun. And you have to start knowing a little bit about the Trojan War, about Greek mythology, about the Pantheon. And one thing is interesting about this book is that even though it's not exactly history, accurate history, it is quite possibly a compound of myth, legend, and history. Because when the Iliad happened, it was the same period when happened something called the collapse of the Bronze Age, the late Bronze Age, in which a lot of powerful civilizations ceased to exist violently and abruptly. And you have the Mycenaean civilization, the Hittite civilization, and they all disappeared off the face of the earth. And it's quite possibly that this is a mixture of the events that happened during this collapse and the Greek mythology altogether. And it just made this beautiful piece of literature. So you have to have that in mind and know that this wasn't exactly written. This was part of the oral tradition of the Greeks. So they would gather around and someone would sing the verses of the Iliad, which is fantastic. Someone had to memorize the verses. And then centuries later, a guy called Homer, or possibly two individuals, three individuals, wrote it down. We don't know if Homer was one individual or a multitude of people. So that's what you have to know. And what I'm going to do now is a sort of summary, a brief summary of the legends that would lead to the Trojan War. It all began with the prophecy. Zeus was hanging in the beach and he saw this beautiful sea nymph called Thetis. And he instantly decided that I want to marry that girl. She was very beautiful. But he heard later a prophecy that said that the son of Thetis would be more powerful than his father. So Zeus, Almighty Zeus, very proud of his power, and all the gods are very vain in that sense, in that regard. He decided that, well, I'm not gonna marry that bitch anymore because, well, I don't want to lose my power. Of course not. So he decided to marry Hera, and they all arranged a marriage to Thetis so that she wouldn't pose a threat to Zeus anymore. So they married Thetis to a king, an old man, an old mortal king called Peleus, and that their son wouldn't be a threat. Their son would eventually be the protagonist of the book, Achilles, but that's a digression. Let's get back to the marriage, because the marriage between Thetis and Peleus, it's what's going to lead to the events that caused the Trojan War. Because everybody in the Olympus was invited to that marriage ceremony, except all the major gods and all the minor gods, except for one goddess in particular, the goddess Ares. And she was invited because she was the goddess of discord, and nobody wants discord in their party. So she wasn't invited. Zeus said to Hermes, don't let that bitch into the party. But she went to the party nevertheless. She stops at the door and throws an apple, a golden apple, in which is written these words, to the fairest, to the most beautiful. And of course that was going to create discord because the gods, they are very vain. And three goddesses thought that the apple was dedicated to them, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. And they couldn't decide to whom the apple was dedicated to, so they asked for Zeus' intervention. But Zeus also didn't want to make part of that quarrel, and she asked for Hermes to find a solution. Hermes heard that there was a shepherd that lived in Mount Ida, there was a very honest man, and that he would be the perfect judge for that quarrel. So he appointed this guy called Paris, a shepherd, to judge the three goddesses. This Paris guy, he wasn't only a shepherd, he was, in fact, the son of the king of Troy, King Priam and Queen Hecuba. But how on earth this guy ended up being a shepherd in a mount, far away from everyone? Because when he was a little baby, his mother, Hecuba, had a dream, this crazy dream, that she was giving birth to a flaming torch. And so seer in the court associated that dream with a prophecy that said that his son, Paris, would be the downfall of Troy. So they had to kill the baby. But King Priam and Queen Hecuba couldn't kill their own baby, so they delivered the baby to a farmer to do the dirty job. But the farmer didn't kill the baby either, because he couldn't do it. So he just abandoned the baby in a forest, hoping that a bear would kill the baby. But the bear didn't kill the baby. The bear just knuckled the baby, and he managed to survive. So the shepherd go back to the woods and found out the baby is alive, and he decided to raise the baby surreptitiously without the King Priam and the Queen Hecuba knowing of that fact. So Prince Paris grew up to be an honest man. He marries, but then he's chosen by Hermes to be the judge in what is known as the Judgment of Paris. And so that the three goddesses appear in front of him, and Paris, he was very young, and so he decided that he wanted to see the boobs of the three goddesses to be able to judge who was the most beautiful. And so the goddesses stripped down and stayed naked in front of him, but he couldn't make up his mind. All the boobs were very beautiful, equally beautiful. So the goddesses decided to bribe him. Hera offered him the whole of Europe and the whole of Asia, and Athena offered him wisdom and power in battle. But Aphrodite knew better and offered him the love of the most beautiful woman in all of Greece. And that's what Prince Paris chose. He chose love. But Aphrodite forgot to mention to him that the most beautiful woman in the whole of Greece was already married. She was Helen of Sparta. She was married to the king of Sparta. And that, of course, created a problem. Not to Paris, because he get back to the court. He lived a time with their parents, and then he traveled all the way from Troy to Sparta to meet this beautiful lady that would be the love of his life. But he was well received, of course, by everyone. And when the king Menelaus needed to travel a little bit to bury one of his uncles in Crete, Paris took the opportunity to kidnap Helen. And there are two versions of this story. The first is that he actually kidnapped her against her will, and the other version is that Aphrodite intervened, sending a Cupid and to throw an arrow in Helen so that she will fall in love with Paris, fulfilling the prophecy and the promise that she made to Paris. And so they all fly away, sail away to Troy, and that is what caused the Trojan War. Because when Menelaus returned to the court, he found out that his wife was kidnapped. He's mad, he's crazy, and then he asked for the help of his brother Agamemnon, who is the king of Mycenae. And he managed to gather an army and raise an army that would go to Troy and start this war. But you might wonder, why on earth everybody decided that they would join this war? Because when Helen was single, she was very beautiful, and everybody wanted to marry her. Although kings wanted to marry Helen. And I think it was Odysseus had the idea that they all should make a pledge to protect Helen, no matter who the king would eventually be. Yeah. And they all agree with that pledge. And when she was kidnapped, everybody attended to this pledge, and then they all sail away to in a 10-year war against Troy, besieging Troy, the great walls of Troy, during 10 years. And the book starts in the ninth year of this war, when Achilles, remember when I said that Tetris and Peleo marry, and they had a son, and the son would be Achilles, the main protagonist of the book. He's a very powerful warrior. He isn't immortal because when he was a little baby, his mother hold him by the heel in the river Styx to grant him immortality. The river would go all the way to the underworld, but since the heel was now submerged, that part of his body was vulnerable. That's why you have the expression Achilles' heel. So in the future, he's shot by an arrow by Paris in the heel, and then he died. So he's one in that story. It's not in the Iliad. It's in another books. So that's how the story begins, with Achilles being mad about Agamemnon because Agamemnon took one of his beautiful slaves, and that's what you have to know about this book. And it's going to be really fun if you know all of these facts before you go into the book. And the major themes of this book is fantastic. How this book can still be relevant today, because the themes of love and pride and forgiveness, they are very important here. And there are even parts of this book that are moving, and the other parts are funny. And so this is a tremendous piece of literature, and it's totally explainable why this is a success until this day. And the other interesting thing about this book is that a lot of characters here will appear in other stories, like Aeneas. Aeneas is the son of Priam too, and he escaped the Trojan War, and he's going to refuge himself in Italy. And in 15 generations later, one of his descendants, Romulus and Remus, two descendants, found what we know as Italy today. So it's very interesting, and this is a tremendous book, and I urge you to take it as a challenge. It is difficult only in the beginning, but then it really gets the narrative flows, and you're going to be passionate about this. So this is my 2 cents on this book. It's not a review, but an account of my experience, and I hope you liked it.